Colt McCoy is probably one of, if not the greatest Texas quarterback of all time. He finished as one of the winningest college quarterbacks of all time and has since had his number 12 jersey retired at Texas. But who is Colt McCoy? In the Who Is series, we go through the backstories of up-and-coming collegiate and pro athletes. In this week's Flashback Friday episode, we are going through the career of Colt McCoy. If there's a player you want to see in future episodes, make sure to leave it in the comments section below. Colt McCoy was born on September 5th, 1986 in Hobbs, New Mexico, but grew up in Tuscola, Texas. Tuscola is a small town of about 800 that is near Abilene. While McCoy was at Texas, Billy Pierce served as the city secretary, telling the Los Angeles Times, "We've never had as much publicity as we've had with Colt. Everybody knows where Tuscola is." And she wiped her tears as she continued, saying, "I'm just emotional, talking about Colt and the Cowboys. I cry when I'm happy. I cry when I'm sad. I cry when I see a flag." The McCoy family moved to Tuscola from Hobbs when Colt was in 7th grade, after his father took over the head coaching job at Jim Ned High. When asked about growing up in Tuscola, McCoy said, "I loved it. There were more people living in my dorm room in my wing when I got to Texas than in my hometown. People in small towns are so friendly, so nice. You know everybody. There are no secrets. Everybody knows where you are all the time." Former Texas head coach Mac Brown used to say, "Tuscola was so remote, the hunting got better the closer you got to town." Growing up, McCoy drew people to him, with one of his high school teachers saying he has a persona about him that attracts people. He wasn't just friendly with the cool kids, even the kids that weren't so cool. He was friendly to all of them. He didn't try to be better than anybody. He had no airs about him. Throughout his career, McCoy carried his hometown on his shoulders, saying, "I try to soak all it in. Right now, I'm living in the moment, getting prepared. Someday when it's all said and done, I'll look back and be very proud of where I came from." McCoy would attend Jim Ned High, where he would be coached by his father. McCoy would take over the starting quarterback job as a sophomore while also playing free safety on defense. McCoy would suffer a concussion while tackling a 250-pound running back, which caused him to miss 2 games. At the time, Jim Ned was 8-0, but the season was derailed without McCoy. As a result, McCoy's father didn't want him playing free safety or on defense anymore. As a junior, McCoy threw for 3,939 yards and 50 touchdowns, which was a 2A record and the 6th all-time in Texas high school history, while also rushing for 521 yards. Along with playing quarterback, McCoy served as his high school's punter, punting 21 times for an average of 38.7 yards. McCoy led Jim Ned to a 14-1 record and the 2A division finals. During the semifinals, McCoy recorded 320 passing yards and 4 touchdowns, while also rushing for 150 yards and 3 more touchdowns on the ground in a 49-21 win over Shallow Water. As a senior, McCoy threw for 3,806 yards and 47 touchdowns while rushing for 541 yards and 7 touchdowns, while punting 20 times, averaging 42.2 yards per punt. The highlight of his season came against Grape Creek when he completed 15 of his 19 passes for 402 yards and 6 touchdowns in a 55-0 win. McCoy led Jim Ned to a 12-1 record and the District 3 2A title. While in high school, McCoy racked up awards, being named 2-time Associated Press 2A Offensive MVP and First-Team All-State selection, 2-time Texas Sports Writer Association First-Team All-State, and All-West Texas MVP, covering all classes in 2004. He finished his high school career throwing for 9,344 yards and 116 touchdowns, while also rushing for 1,575 yards and 21 touchdowns on the ground. He finished his high school career as the all-time leading passer in Texas 2A history and 6th all-time in Texas, while his 116 passing touchdowns ranks 3rd in Texas prep history. Along with football, McCoy also competed in track and was a 4-year starter for the basketball team. His first 3 years, he played shooting guard, being named All-State selection and averaging 17 points per game as a junior, while as a senior, he played point guard. Coming out of high school, according to 24/7 Sports Composite, Colt McCoy was a 3-star recruit who was the 12th best pro-style quarterback, 64th best player in Texas, and 405th best player nationally. He collected offers from the likes of Georgia Tech, Kansas State, Missouri, Purdue, and Texas. McCoy chose to stay close to home and attend the University of Texas due to the tradition and chance to compete for a national championship every year. Colt McCoy would redshirt during the 2005 season, the year Vince Young led the Longhorns to the national championship. He served as a quarterback for the scout team. Going into the 2006 season, Vince Young chose to forego his senior year, and the quarterback battle was between Colt McCoy and Javon Sneed, a 4-star recruit and the number 2 dual-threat quarterback in the 2006 recruiting class out of Stevensville, Texas. McCoy would win the quarterback competition and led the Longhorns to a season opener win against North Texas. The following week, Texas played the number 1 ranked team in the nation, Ohio State, and would lose 24-7, snapping their 21-game win streak. McCoy struggled throwing for 156 yards and a touchdown, as well as an interception. Later in the season, McCoy threw for 2 touchdowns against Oklahoma in a 28-10 win and threw for 6 touchdowns in a win against Baylor. McCoy would get hurt against Kansas State, and it was unknown if he would be able to return in time for the Texas A&M game. McCoy would play against the Aggies, but was knocked out of the game after taking a brutal helmet-to-helmet hit, which resulted in a severe pinched nerve. It was unknown how long he would be out for, and things only got more complicated for the Longhorns when Snead decided to transfer, meaning if McCoy was not cleared for the bowl game against Iowa, Texas would not have a scholarship quarterback playing. Luckily, McCoy was cleared to play and led the Longhorns to the win. McCoy finished the season throwing for 2,570 yards, 29 touchdowns, an NCAA freshman record at the time before being broken by Sam Bradford the following season, and 7 interceptions, while adding 2 touchdowns on the ground. McCoy was named National Freshman of the Year by Sporting News, while also winning the Big 12 Offensive Freshman of the Year and Newcomer of the Year awards. He was also named Second Team Big 12. Going into the 2007 season, there was a lot of hype surrounding McCoy, with him being named to the Heisman watch list. Texas came into the season as the 4th-ranked team in the preseason poll as well. McCoy opened the season throwing for 1,064 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions in Texas' first 4 games, before having 4 interceptions while also suffering a concussion in the first half before returning in an upset loss to Kansas State. He followed that performance up, throwing for 324 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception in a loss to Oklahoma. McCoy would rebound but struggled with turnovers throughout the season. By the end of the season, he took a bigger role as a leader and led the Longhorns to a win over Arizona State in the Holiday Bowl. Colt McCoy finished his sophomore year throwing for 3,303 yards, 22 touchdowns, and 18 interceptions, while also rushing for 492 yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground. In the season opener of his junior year, McCoy passed for 222 yards and rushed for 103 yards, becoming the second player in Texas history to throw for 200 and rush for 100 in a game, joining Vince Young. In the 3rd game of the season, McCoy became the record holder for career passing touchdowns, and throughout the first 4 games of the season, McCoy completed 80% of his passes. Throughout the season, the Longhorns would beat number 1 Oklahoma, number 6 Oklahoma State, and number 11 Missouri. Longhorns finished the season going 12-1 with their only loss to Texas Tech, and beat Ohio State in the Fiesta Bowl. McCoy finished the season throwing for 3,859 yards, 34 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions, completing 76.7% of his passes, while also rushing for 561 yards and 11 touchdowns. McCoy broke numerous records and won multiple awards while finishing second in one of the closest Heisman races ever, losing to Sam Bradford by 122 points. As a senior, McCoy led Texas to a 12-0 regular season record. He threw for 470 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception against UCF, and 396 yards and 4 touchdowns against Kansas. Texas would beat Nebraska 13-12 in the Big 12 Championship, kicking a game-winning field goal as time expired. Texas would play Alabama in the BCS Championship, and during the opening drive, McCoy got hurt. McCoy would be replaced by Garrett Gilbert, who completed 15 of his 40 passes for 186 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions, leaving Longhorns fans wondering what if McCoy didn't get hurt, with them losing the game. McCoy finished the season throwing for 3,521 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions, completing 70.6% of his passes, while also rushing for 348 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. McCoy was named the 2009 Walter Camp Foundation Player of the Year, as well as the 2009 Maxwell Award, Collegiate Player of the Year, Davey O'Brien Award, Nation's Top Quarterback, Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award, Nation's Top Senior Quarterback, and Manning Award. He also finished 3rd in the Heisman voting. In his 4 years as a starter, McCoy would go 45-8 as a starter, leaving college with the most wins in NCAA history before Kellen Mond broke that record. He finished his career with 13,253 passing yards and 112 touchdowns, while having a passer rating of 155, which are all the most all-time by a Texas player. He finished his career completing 70.3% of his passes, just falling short of Colt Brennan's NCAA record, 70.4%. McCoy rewrote the Longhorns record book and entered the 2010 NFL Draft, where he was drafted 85th overall in the 3rd round by the Cleveland Browns. There were mixed opinions on McCoy's pro potential, and he was unable to compete at the NFL Combine due to the injury he suffered in the title game. McCoy started 8 games his rookie year, throwing for 1,576 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions, while also rushing for a touchdown. In 2011, McCoy started 13 games, throwing for 2,733 yards, 14 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. Since the 2011 season, McCoy has served as a career backup, playing for the 49ers, Washington Football Team, and New York Giants. He has played in 43 games, making 29 starts, throwing for 6,405 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 28 interceptions, while also rushing for 506 yards and 2 touchdowns. As of March 30th, McCoy signed a contract with the Arizona Cardinals to serve as the backup to Kyler Murray. He still does a lot of work in the Austin, Texas area as well. Colt McCoy has had an interesting but respectable NFL career as a career backup, but will always be known as a Texas Longhorn legend. But what do you think? Is Colt McCoy one of the greatest Longhorn players of all time? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, check out my other videos in the Who Is series. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and as always, remember to embrace the grind.